All right, shalom, shalom, Yasharah, shalom, shalom, Ashpakan, shalom, shalom, world. This is a part 3 of a series on what to look out for when reading Paul's writings, what to understand about Paul. And I was going to say originally it's going to be called Why You Should Renounce and Denounce Paul. In a sense, kind of have that idea about him, but there's still some meat, that is there to behold. Eat the meat, spit the bones. The dude just burped, and it's like, you don't even need that. That's just being too kind, You really don't even need Paul. A lot of the love and compassion stuff that he does expound on, you get enough of that from the other writers. He overly romanticized it. You got to remember, they were living in a Greco-Roman era, so the romance was in the air, so to speak. So it was all this love and lovifying, the Torah, the doctrine, because that's what people were talking about, back then, like romantic theater, romantic theology was kind of like the thing, romantic ideologies and romance, love, and all this kind of stuff, and, it was like showing off by the great depths of works of love, what's the greatest expression of love, and now they have Yahusha, so now they can convey that in a Greco-Roman way to the pagans, and so that's how that happened. But today, it doesn't really, pertain to us as much. Yahuwah's always doing something new. Not that he doesn't change, or he changes not, but, he says, behold, I make all things new. Like, things are, he plays out what Torah looks like in this paradigm, that paradigm, this era, that era, how it should look, how it can always prevail in a different era, different society. And I think in our society, we already have an overstimulation of romanticized love and everything, and that got us to the point where coexist, everybody love everybody and do it without will and respect it and accept it, and it's okay, and even being a believer, and that's all thanks to Paul, honestly. But nonetheless, I do believe that had to happen. I do want to say that Yahuwah allowed that to happen, knowing that it was necessary to get the entire world on board on the bandwagon for a while, but then get people to, okay, but this is actually the truth, so then they can actually, oh, wait a minute, once everybody's on board and think it's just this easy, watered down version of all you gotta do is believe and you're okay, but then, well, that was easy, well, let me just see what else is in there that I can read and edify myself on, then like slowly start pulling you into, oh wow, the commandments feel like they're actually for us according to Yahusha's words, and so, that being said, Barak Yahuwah, it was necessary. Yahuwah used it. It's like what Paul says actually is about himself, when he said that, the Torah was only in part, it was like a trainer, a schoolmaster to Yahusha, and now that Yahusha comes, we don't need it. It's actually the same way, and by the way, he didn't mean that. He meant that, like, Torah was a trainer unto Messiah. Now that we have Yahusha, the fullness of embodiment is Yahusha. Like, he's the cherry on top. He's what it looks like. Like, we had Torah, and we're doing it the best we could, but now we have Yahusha to do Torah in, if that makes sense. But a lot of it sounded like he was doing away with it, and he kept it gray that way. He could try to spin it. So anyways, nonetheless, I feel like Paul, in the same way, was the schoolmaster, the trainer of Christianity. The just believe in Yahusha. That's all you gotta do, and be loving and caring and friendly, and that, like, carried everybody through the centuries until the end. And it's like, oh, but now come back to Torah, in Yahusha. Oh, Barak Yahuwah. So that being said, we're gonna finish up the read. I'm not gonna go and touch on everything, go back to part 1 and part 2, because I was only able to get 10% charge, so barely enough to say what I need to say right now, and that's it. But so I won't reiterate anything from the other videos, but you should go back and watch part 1 and part 2 to understand what I'm about to say right now, because you're gonna be confused, why are you saying this? So I don't want you to feel that way. So this is Yaakov, James chapter 3. We left off in part 2 at the end, where we're talking about that we're pretty much making the last case that the letter James wrote was actually all about Paul and of course generalizing it to the general public as well. But for the most part, he was more predominantly towards Paul. And we know that by, do not know, foolish man, belief without works is dead. You used Abraham as an example of belief. What was Abraham not considered righteous, by belief when he offered up Yitzchak? So you see his works were working with his belief to make his belief perfect. So we're justified by works and not by belief alone. That's he literally says it. It says, verse 24, chapter 2, you see then that a man is declared right by works and not by belief alone. So by works. James says it. Who you going to believe? I'm going to go with James, Makes more sense. And then everything else against Paul. Watch part 1 and part 2. Nonetheless, we're going to touch on finishing up chapter 3. We talked about how some of the things he said were pertaining to Paul. And we left off on verse 9 of chapter 3, where it says, with the mouth, that it's an unruly thing, and that he was referring to Paul being unruly with his mouth, not taming a word, because he's say one thing and say another. Which one is it? And so that was double-mindedness, on Paul. But he was trying to be a diplomat, say what these people wanted to hear, and then say what these people wanted to hear. I'm all things to everybody, Jew to a Jew, Gentile to a Gentile. You don't have to keep the law, Galatians and, Gentile Galatians. And then when he goes to Jerusalem, it's like, hey, man, they say you're telling Jews amongst the Gentiles. He didn't know they were there. There was Jews amongst them. That you're saying forsake Torah and Moses and whatnot. What is it? Well, do what I say. Keep the commandments. Do this offering of the Nazirite vow so everybody will know that what has been heard about you. No, it's not so. And he just says in the very next line, and Paul did it. He didn't say nothing. He didn't object. If the law's done away with, why didn't he tell James there? What are you talking about? The law's done away with. How come James didn't know about that? So, and then everybody was more agreeing with James. So, he was being subtle. He was being sly, quiet. So that's not cool. So then now it's talking about how his mouth is unruly. With it we barak Elohim and Abba, and with it we curse men who have been made in the likeness of Elohim. And we used an example of when Paul gets slapped, when he's in jail at the end of Acts. He gets slapped, and he says, Yahusha's going to destroy you with fire or something. He says something like that. You whitewashed tomb. And they say, do you speak to the Kahana Gadol that way? And Paul said, oh, sorry. I didn't know it was the Kahana Gadol. For it is written, do not speak evil of your leaders. Nonetheless, we saw that he just had an outburst moment that he, couldn't tame his tongue is what I'm getting at. He just, just blurted out sometimes maybe. Got a little impulsive. And so, but he cursed the ruler. He says he can get a little, stirred up and just feisty. He can get feisty. See that when he had a sharp thing with Barnabas, and they split up. And then there's even another account. When some demon-possessed person was following them in Acts, I don't remember, 15, 16, and it says that Paul being annoyed, he finally yelled at the person. So, Paul has his little moments like that. And so, out of the same mouth proceed baraka and cursing. My brothers, this should not be so. Does the fountain send forth the sweet and the bitter from the same opening? My brothers, is a fig tree able to bear olives, or a grapevine figs? So neither is a fountain to make salt and sweet water. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his true behavior his works, and meekness, and chakma, wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy, so he's right here accusing James, Loki, Yakub is accusing Paul. He's saying, I got you figured out, of being having bitter jealousy and ambition, self-seeking, and all that for the coveting, right? He even admits he has a coveting issue for position. He says, but if you have bitter jealousy and self-seeking for position in your labim, do not boast against and lie against the truth. What? Did anybody even understand what that said? Why would he say that, and who's he saying it to? Do not boast against and lie against the truth. Okay, what did he talk? Now, consider he's talking about Paul, and then it makes perfect sense. Because what did Paul do? He boasted against and lied against the truth. How did he do that? When he says the law is done away with, he's boasting against the truth. Say, oh, the law I don't need the law puts us to death, but we're free now. He's boasting against the law and lying against the truth. Because what is the truth? Torah is the truth. Your righteousness is righteousness forever, and your Torah is the truth. That's the truth. Psalms 119, 142. This is not the Chakma coming down from above. He's talking about when you boast against the Torah and lie against it, like saying it's been done away with. This is not the Chakma wisdom coming down from above, but it is earthly. That's an earthly thing to say. That's worldly. That's like doing away with the law. That's earthly. It's unspiritual. It's demonic. He's talking about the doctrine of saying the law is done away with. That's demonic. Because Yahushua even says in Matthew 5:17, don't even think that I came to do away with the Torah and the Nabim I didn't come to do away with, but to raise the standard, fully fill it up. For it is written, don't have hate towards your neighbor, or it is written, don't commit murder. But if you even have hate towards your neighbor in your life, you've already murdered him. So is that doing away with, or is that fulfilling, filling it up, raising the standard? Filling it up, raising the standard. See? So he's talking about Paul's doctrine, that Paul's doctrine about the law's done away with, just got to believe, and the law's put curse and don't do the law. That this is not the wisdom coming down from above, but it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and self-seeking are, there's confusion in every foul deed. So that's why there's a lot of confusion with Paul, right? There's confusion in every foul deed. There's foul deeds. But the Chakma from above, like greed and whatnot, and who knows what else. But, you know, what, like eating food sacrificed to idols, oh, it's okay as long as you're clear of conscience. That's like foul deeds. Like, because then Yahushua says in Revelation, you know, I have this against you that you eat food sacrificed to idols. So that already overrides what Paul was saying. Paul was saying it's okay to do it as long as you don't feel bad about it. And so that's every foul deed. But the Chakma from above is first clean, then peaceable, shalomi, shalama, gentle, ready to obey. Ready to obey what? The Torah. It's clean. What is clean? The Torah. You know, it's Torah-centric. It's in line with Torah. It's peaceable, shalama. It's reasonable, gentle, ready to obey, filled with compassion and through fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in shalom by those who make shalom. And so he was talking about how, you know, Paul, I think, was already stirring up things. Like they already would hear that reports that he was, you know, getting things stirred up wherever he went. And so, you know, that's just what sometimes people do, try to make a name for themselves. Controversy, they try to stir it up, stir up the pot. So, chapter 4. Where do fightings and strivings come from among you? Do they not come from your pleasures that battle in your members? So he already had a knack for causing fighting and strivings. Remember, we had that fight and strive with Barnabas, you know, because Barnabas wanted to take Yahukanan, and he's like, no, he didn't come with us when we first built the thing. So he's not, you know, like all this like selfish, like carnal way of thinking, but yeah, he thought he was Ruach. But then when you're not, you don't see what you can't see. He's just overly proud and abrasive and like oppressive almost, but doesn't see it. He thinks he's cool. But it's like, nah. Because we talked about in the Torah says, share with your brothers who didn't take part in something, whatever you plunder from a nation, you share the spoil with your community. So they built the assembly, and he didn't want to share with Yahukanan because they're gonna go probably take some offerings, and he didn't want to have him share in that because he wasn't there to build that, to conquer that, you know, assembly, to like build that up in a sense, conquer a nation, you know, take the spoil. So where do fightings and strivings come from among you? Do they not come from your pleasures that battle in your members? You desire and do not have. He desires positions and do not have, or funds or whatever he was desiring. You murder and are jealous. Let's call him out, because we know Paul technically was a participant to murder. You murder and are jealous and are unable to obtain. You strive and fight and you do not possess, and because you do not ask, and because you do not ask, and we know he does not obtain, because even in like Corinthians, I think 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, but he gets into asking a lot. He's like, sorry, my brothers, that I'm coming back again for a third time, and I hate to ask, you know, I'm saying that I'm coming out, you know, I might need something, but I'm not coming to, you know, get something from you, though. It's because I love you, but, you know, love is going to give, you know, something, so I'm really looking forward to if you give me something in a nutshell. You know, that's what's going on. And so it says, you ask and do not receive because you ask evilly in order to spend it on your pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses, so now he's generalizing it, do not know that friendship with the world is enmity with Elohim. So this might even be a pass at Paul too, because he would say, I'm a Jew to a Jew and a Gentile to a Gentile. So, you know, he associated a lot with the world, but then generalizing too with just the general idea of like don't be involved with the world's involved with. Whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. Or do you think that the scripture speaks to no purpose? Does the Ruach that dwells in us intensely crave unto envy? So does the Ruach that dwells within us intensely crave into envy? Paul would say, that he struggled a lot with coveting, and that, oh, wretched man am I. And, then even says he had to have a malak, a messenger from Yahuwah, to buff at him, because of him puffing himself up with, pride and with all the revelation and everything. And so, this is stuff that James was even tackling on with him. It says, but he gives greater favor because of this. He says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. So then subject yourselves to Elohim, resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. So this is an idea that he's addressing Paul again, saying, hey, I heard you got a thorn in the flesh, so subject yourself to Elohim, humble yourself, resist the devil, and he shall flee from you, so that you don't have that thorn in the flesh. Draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. Cleanse hands, sinners, and cleanse hearts. Labim, you double-minded. So there's a double-minded thing again where, he's going to tell the Gentiles, oh, you don't have to keep the law, but then he tells the Romans, oh, we keep the law. He says, you can find every kind of thing with Paul's writings. That's why people, it's confusion there. And so we already tackled that earlier in this video if you go back a little bit. And so, lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to sadness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Adon, and he shall lift you up. Brothers, do not speak against one another. And again, we know that, Paul does that in his letters. He'll say, when he says, in the emissaries, consider themselves to be pillars, whatever they thought they were nothing to me. They didn't add nothing to me. So, even in writing, that's kind of pretty hardcore to put them on blast in letters that you're giving to assembly, to the Galatians and stuff, that they have no business knowing that kind of detail. You know what I mean? Those are personal things, that your own feelings. When he talks to them, he says, but from those who were esteemed to be what they were, it makes no difference to me. He's talking about the 12 emissaries. For Elohim shows no partiality. For those who were esteemed contributed not to me. So it's like he's like, they didn't give anything to me. He's like putting his feelings out on blast. And then later he says, so when Jacob, or when James, Kapha, James, Peter, and John, who seem to be supports, it's like, it's a little sarcastic, and so he does that kind of stuff. And then he had that issue with Barnabas again, where they had a strife because he didn't want to take John, because John didn't go with us to build, so why should he benefit from, whatever they give us from the tithes and offerings, so it's a little selfish, you just got to read between the lines. And so that's what's going on here. And so humble yourselves on the side of the Adon, and he shall lift you up. Brothers, do not speak against one another. He that speaks against a brother and judges his brother speaks against Torah and judges Torah. And if you judge Torah, you are not a doer of Torah, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge, who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? Because, he did a lot of that, calling out certain people low-key. Like when he called out Peter, even, in one of the other writings, and he said that, and Peter, when I saw him, eating with the Gentiles, and then, when the Jews showed up, I caught him in his hypocrisy. He got up and went over there to the Jews and, left the Gentiles hanging, made a difference between them, and made it was hypocrite. In Paul's eyes, he said he was being a hypocrite because he wasn't acting in love that we're all one, but he was showing partiality, esteeming the Jews higher than the Gentiles. But it says that the Jews just showed up, is what I'm noticing. He says, but when the Jews showed up, he went over there to sit with them and talk to them. And I'm thinking maybe there might have been a little screw loose. I'm sorry to say, sometimes the most brilliant minds and writers, may have a little psychological stuff. And what I'm seeing, it could be possible that Peter just got up to go say hi to the Jews. They were sitting down here with the Gentiles. He's like, oh, the Jews are here. Hold on, let me go over there. And then Peter's like, are you a hypocrite to, eat with the Gentiles, live with them, and then make yourself, a Jew, like, show up? And I would imagine Peter and them were like, dude, what's wrong with you, man? Why you tripping? Like, in my mind, that's the version I see now, Like, they're like, I just came over here to say hi to my brothers, but you're making a big issue. Like, you're seeing it wrong, It's like sometimes you have people that see things a certain way, through a certain lens. You see someone walking down the street smiling, someone might see someone laughing at them. Like, look at them laughing at us, mocking, like they think. But I'm like, I'm seeing somebody enjoying their day. They're probably just having a nice day and they're smiling. But some people think that they're laughing at you, they're paranoid and insecure. Some people might think that they're just having a nice day and they're just smiling. And so it's like, depending on where your mind's at, the lens you're seeing things. So that's that. But either way, he's causing strife, and openly, like, they didn't go to James. What did the word say? Take them in private and say, hey, man, how come Paul didn't do that with Peter and say, hey, man, it looked like you kind of were showing partiality between our Gentile brothers and the Jews when you got up and went over there. And no, not at all, man. Just coming over to say hi to them. I didn't even try to. They were just eating. I didn't want to, disrupt the meeting. I was like, oh, hold on, I'm going to just say hi. Oh, okay. I just, it looked like you were like, showing partiality. But instead, you like called him out and made a big old scene about it. And anyways, so yeah. You just gotta read between the lines. So then it says, there's one lawgiver and one judge who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, let us go to such and such a city and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. And some of that was in the context, he was a tent maker and he went and did his own thing. When you do not know of tomorrow, for what is your high? For it is a vapor that appears for a little and then disappears. Instead of your saying, if the Adon desires, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your proud speeches. So, we know that his speeches were pretty elaborate and, powerful. That everybody loves Paul's writings because his writings and his speeches, he likes to. And he was a Roman. That was like a Roman philosophical way. You have to understand, Paul grew up with a Roman mentality too, so he can speak the Greco-Roman language, and that's what he kind of used to write his letters to the world. So that's why his letters aren't so Torah-centric seeming. He used his pagan Roman side, to speak the word, but then kind of watered it down. And you got to go back to part 1 and 2 to see where I'm getting at. But then it says, but he does boast a lot in his writings. He said, did he not say, I worked harder than they? Like, he says too many personal things about me and I suffered for these chains, and I worked harder than they did, those 12 disciples. I worked harder than they. He says that in his own writings, but that's an opinion. We can't assume just because it's Paul, because the world taught us, Paul's the greatest ever, so when you read something, if Paul said it, it's true. That's just, what? Let me read it like everybody's on the same playing field and kind of like study them and read between the lines a little bit. And what you got is kind of narcissistic in a way. But now you boast in your proud speeches. All such boasting is wicked. To him then who knows to do tub and does not do it, to him it is sin. Come now, rich ones, weep, crying aloud over the hardships coming upon you. Your riches have rotted and your garments have become moth-eaten. So a lot of people don't know rich. Again, Paul came from wealth. He was studying under Gamaliel. He paid for that position. That's like going to Harvard under a certain specific professor, paying to have that seat reserved. He was being polished to be like the rising star of Judaism. And then when everything flipped, he freaked out. So that's why he was persecuting the believers, and then can't beat them, join them, and then he wanted to rise in their world. That's what he coveted position. See the wages of the workmen who mowed your fields that you kept back cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of Yahuwah Sabaoth of multitudes and armies. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your lab as in a day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous. He does not resist you. So again, that's something Paul was known for, right? When he was like, he's speaking to Paul in the context of when he was a Pharisee and a Jew, because he's like seen him in that position still in his mind. You murdered the righteous. He does not resist you. So brothers, be patient until the coming of the Adon. But he does still he still tries to get him to humble himself. See, the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it for it until it receives the early and the latter rain. You too be patient, establish your labim, for the coming of the Adon has drawn near. Do not grumble against each other, brothers, lest you be judged. See, the judge is standing at the door. My brothers, as an example of suffering and patience, take the Nabim who spoke in the name of Yahuwah, and we call those Baruch, favored, who endure. You have heard of the endurance of Job, and saw the purpose of Yahuwah, that he is very sympathetic and compassionate. But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by the Shamaim or by the earth or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no. What is James doing there? He's referencing a commandment. That's one of the commandments in the Deuteronomy, is do not swear falsely by the name of Yahuwah. And even Yahusha said that. And when he says, when he's giving the Beatitudes, it wasn't Beatitudes, it's how to keep Torah. He's given, it is written, don't commit murder. But I raise the standard on Torah by saying if you have hate towards your neighbor, you already murdered him. So he's taking Torah, making it even harder. He was fulfilling it, fully filling it up. Don't think I came to do away with the law and the prophets. I didn't come to do away, but to raise the standard, to fill it up. And so he's doing the same thing, reiterating what Yahusha said, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment, because that's according to Torah. And so you can read the rest, but a lot of it connects to issues that we see Paul had, and specific things that Paul said. He directly talked about, like Paul said, all we have to do is believe and not have works. But then James says, don't you know, O foolish man, belief without works is dead. Wasn't Abraham considered righteous when he believed Yahuwah and offered up Yitzchak, Isaac? And so his belief was working with his works and made his belief perfect. So you see that one is justified by works and not by belief alone. He's talking to Paul. And so that being said, we get a warning from Peter. Look at this, Peter, and I think Peter had already had an understanding. He was giving Paul the benefit of the doubt, but just in case, he was going to go ahead and put a fair warning, like to hint that something about Paul, just in case, to let us know so we can pick up what he's putting down. And this is to us about the fair warning about Paul. He says, so reckon the patience of our Adon. This is 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. And reckon the patience of our Adon and reckon the patience of our Adon as deliverance, as also our beloved brother Paul Shav wrote to you according to the wisdom given to him, as also in all letters, speaking in them, talking about Paul's letters, speaking in them concerning these, and where some are hard to understand, right? Paul's letters are hard to understand; they can be confusing. That those who are untaught and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do also the other scripture. So they twist it unto their own destruction, Paul's letters. Well, what kind of destruction? He's about to explain that. He's about to say right here, you then, beloved ones, being forewarned, watch lest you fall from your own steadfastness, being led away with the delusion of the lawless. What? What is the delusion of the lawless? Have you heard of that? Lawlessness. 1 John 3 says sin is lawlessness. What is sin? Breaking the commandments. So breaking the commandments equals lawlessness. So when we see the delusion of the lawless, it would mean that's the delusion of doing away with, of not sin, doing away with the law. The delusion of the lawless is some kind of delusional way, a doctrine saying that the law is done away with. That's the delusion of the lawless. So Peter's already warning us. He's saying, hey, be careful not to get Paul's letters twisted up, because they're hard to understand. They can be confusing. It could be sounding like he's saying the law's done away with. That's been going around. But we got to watch part 1 and 2 for that. And it's hard to understand. Some people might twist it to make it think that it's saying that the law's done away with, but that's not what he's saying at all. So beloved, being forewarned, watch lest you fall from your own steadfastness, being led away to that delusion of lawlessness, of the lawless, that the law's done away with. So that's basically what he's saying. Delusion of the lawless is saying that some kind of delusion saying that the law is done away with is a delusion. And that's the man of sin, the man of lawlessness, right? That's the man of lawlessness that talks about is the man of, that's the anti-Messiah. It's the false JC version that he came to do away with the law. He did it all, so we don't have to do anything. We just believe in him. that's the man of lawlessness, the man of sin. That's the false anti-Messiah version of him. So, but nonetheless, Peter warned us even about Paul's writings that, got to watch part 1 and 2, please, so you understand everything. Yeah, Peter warns us, be careful of Paul. That's how big of a deal Paul was, like, as far as, like, be careful, man, because I haven't got to see everything yet, because I don't think all his letters circulated back, but, like, we're already hearing that, there's an issue going on with Paul out there, and there's a lot of controversy, so we're going to get to the bottom of this, but, yeah, you be forewarned too, man. Don't let nothing make you think that the law's done away with, put you in the delusion of the lawless. And we know that, again, I will reiterate this one just for the sake of reiterating. Acts, 21, again, says that, Acts 21 verse 20 says, this is Paul showing up, and he's telling Paul's telling James how everything's going with the Gentiles. And it says, and on the following day, Paul went in with us to James, Yaqub, and all the elders came, and having greeted them, he was relating one by one what Elohim had done among the Gentiles through his service. So he's like, hey man, I'm getting a bunch of Gentiles converted. Yeah, tell them the law's done away with, you don't have to do it, and da-da-da. And when they heard it, they praised the Adon, and they said to him, you see, brother, this is James telling Paul, how many thousands of Jews there are who have believed, and all are ardent for the Torah. So I'm thinking that a conversation again from part 1 and 2, that Paul was saying, hey man, it's hard to get the Jews to believe in Messiah Yahushua, much less once you even get them to believe, to forsake even the man-made traditions and Judaism and just do Torah alone. And James is like, trust Yah, we're working on it. Yahuwah is working through us for that. And he said, look how many thousands of Jews believed, and they're ardent for Torah. Like the Torah, the commandments alone, without the Jewish stuff, like the added traditions that Messiah rebuked. Like they're down to believe in Yahushua and to do just Torah. And then what does he say after that? He says, but hey man, what's this? They have been informed about you, brother, that you teach all the and they have been informed about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. What? To forsake Moses? Say not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the practices of the Torah? What then is it? They shall certainly hear that you have come. So this idea that the law's done away with, if that's the truth, it was news to James. He didn't know about it. You see what I'm saying? Like, this stuff is in our books, but it's up to us to see and read between the lines. Like, we're supposed to investigate. We're investigators, supposed to investigate the case and see what's really going on. James apparently didn't know the law was done away with. He's like, they heard that you're teaching others that the law is done away with among the Gentiles. So do this. What we say to you, we have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and be cleansed with them, and pay their expenses so that they shave their heads. That's the Nazarite vow, part of the Torah. When you make a vow and you shave your head, and then you go and cut it and shave it out for an offering. And all shall know that what they have been informed about you is not so, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the Torah. So that would have been Paul's rising moment to say, like, no, the Torah's done away with. What do you mean, James? But he doesn't. Skip down to verse 25 and it says, or 26, and it says, then Paul took the men on the next day, and having been cleansed with them, went into the dwelling, the Mikdash, to announce the completion of the days of separation until the offering should be presented to each one of them. He just followed into volume. Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, go pay their expenses and keep Torah, so that everybody knows that what they heard about you is not so, that you also keep Torah orderly. And he's like, yep, okay. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm seeing. And then it finally got around. And then so there's little nuggets like Paul says, at the end of one of his writings, says, all Asia has forsaken me. But who is the assemblies that Yahushua wrote to? The 7 assemblies of Asia. But yet those are the ones that forsook Paul. And then, Paul writes it's okay to eat food sacrificed to idols. But Yahushua says in the writings of the 7 assemblies, he says it's not okay to eat food sacrificed to idols. Also, he says, I know there that you have that woman of Thyatira, that Jezebel, who teaches to eat food sacrificed to idols and all kinds of abomination. Well, who's that woman from Thyatira? That prophetess Jezebel. We actually have something like that in the book of in Acts. It might be that very woman. Here it is. This is Acts 16, verse 14. It says, and a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira. How ironic, the only time we hear about Thyatira in Acts, there's a woman. And a woman, a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira, worshiping Elohim, was hearing was hearing, whose lab the Adon opened up to pay attention to what Paul said. So she was under Paul. Again, let me read that. It sounded bad. And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira, worshipping Elohim, was hearing, whose lab the Adon opened to pay attention to what Paul said. And when she was immersed, he immersed her and her household. She begged us, saying, if you have judged me to be believing in the Adon, come to my house and stay. And she urged us. So she invited Paul to stay with her. So her and Paul got like this. And then there's a woman in Thyatira that Jezebel leads my people astray, who eats food sacrificed to idols. Paul said it's okay to eat food sacrificed to idols as long as it doesn't mess with your conscience. Yahushua in Revelation says no. So, what I'm saying? There's many other things I could say, but it's all there. You gotta go part 1, part 2 as well. Nonetheless, I will read what the fulfillment. I actually think that at the end of the day, I think Paul had a kind of a little bit of a nervous breakdown because he was being polished up his entire high, like the Olympics, to be like the president of the United States for Judaism in a sense, like Gamliel. He came from wealth and they paid for his position, reservation. Also, Yahushua comes. That's why the Pharisees killed Yahushua, because he was threatening their plans and stuff for the future, and Paul was one of them. That's why Paul was putting